Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I am Rebecca Wood, the COO and Vice President of Investor Development at Greater Louisville, Inc. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon and welcome to GLI's COVID-19 Help Resource. All participants have been muted, so if you would like to submit a question, please use the chat feature located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And you can also, I would like to note, find lots of COVID-19 resources on greaterlouisville.com or on crisissupporthub.org. As we have been dealing with the pandemic crisis, it is important for us all to recognize that there are best practices. Sorry, that's my 4-year-old in our new virtual environment. Okay, as most of us, as you can see, as most of us had to quickly adapt to this, we are finding pros and cons to remote working. You will hear my children in the background probably anytime that I am talking today. Many of us maybe were able to work from home and work this way prior to the current climate, but obviously probably not this much. And many folks did not do this at all. So we're going to hear from a remote working expert today on tips, tricks, and an outlook on how this time of remote working is going to shape the future of the way we work post-COVID-19. We are grateful today to have a representative from GLI top investor HMB Inc. with us to discuss this. Trey Mayer is the Director of Business Solutions for HMB. Trey is a seasoned technologist who has been working remote off and on for the past 10 years. His role with HMB Inc. has been leading a team of remote technologists who design and build business technology solutions for some of the world's largest organizations. His experience ranges from Fortune 50 companies, state and local governments, chambers of commerce, nonprofits, and many private organizations. In the past year, Mayer has held positions on executive and steering committees for some of the region's largest technology conferences, including Louisville's own Codepalooza and Dog Food Con in Columbus, Ohio. He brings a wealth of knowledge related to business technology best practices and organizational change management. I'm so sorry. So as I mentioned, please use the chat feature located at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to start sending your questions throughout the call. During the presentation, the GLI team will sort through those questions and we'll try to cover as many topics as we can in the time allotment we have for today during our facilitated Q&A portion. And then for a summary of today's discussion or access to other COVID-19 resources, please check back and visit greaterlouisville.com. Today's conversation is being recorded and we're also capturing the written chats during the conversation. So a copy of the recording will be included on our follow-up survey email. So with that, thanks again for your time this afternoon, and I'm going to turn it over to Trey.
Hello, thank you, Rebecca, and thanks to GLI for allowing us to kind of spread some tips and tricks with you. As Rebecca mentioned, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat function. We're more than happy to address them and talk through them. But let's get started. So today we're going to talk about best practices for remote workers. And first and foremost, I want to make sure that we're clear that remote working does not equal quarantine working. It's much different. There's circumstances that we can't control. And then there's circumstances like Hunter that we have to take care of. And I have a 20-month-old daughter, so I know exactly how it is. But today we're going to focus kind of on the characteristics and tips and tricks for best practices. First, I'm going to kind of set the tone here. We're going to talk about 4 key areas. We're going to talk about meeting etiquette, and hopefully we all follow today. We'll talk about communication, we'll talk about evolving habits, and then most importantly, we'll talk about our mental health and what that means in terms of remote working. My name is, as Rebecca mentioned, my name is Trey Mayer. I'm the director of what we refer to as our Microsoft Business Solutions practice at HMB Inc. I'm fairly active in the community. You can find me a handful of places, Trey Mayer, Trey Point, and I'd love to engage there as well. Twitter has been beneficial for me as a remote worker, and it's been an outlet for me to consume information and education. As Rebecca mentioned, I have been working on and off for about a decade now. I've worked on site at clients. I've worked in as a startup organization. I had worked in the back of a hair salon. When I started my own company, we worked in this awesome this awesome office place. And surprisingly, I've had to pull over on the side of the road and work remote. I've been through this. It's not always pleasant, but it's part of the flexibility model that we have. So again, thank you all for coming, and let's get started. Eat the frog. We eat the frog. Every morning, let's get up and let's eat a live frog. And I don't mean that literally. Let's go through the day with the satisfaction of knowing that probably the worst thing is going to happen to you all day long. What this means is get up and tackle the hardest thing you can after you get ready. You've got your morning routine down. You sit down to start doing your work for the day. You're working. Take that hardest challenge, address it first thing in the morning, knock it out of the park, and then move on to the things that are not as bad. Maybe not as bad, but maybe that are smaller tasks. So when we first talk about meeting etiquette, I found this quote to be kind of dead on. Be sincere, be brief, and be seated. When Franklin Roosevelt, it's dead on in terms of what we want to look right in terms of meeting etiquette. We want to be ready. So let's have a plan for the day, get your to-do list ready, stick to an agenda, and be honest with that list. So as we come into a meeting, be prepared to talk about what it is you want to talk about in that meeting, what we want to get achieved, because these tools are going to make it easy for us to have a better meeting. Nobody, as we all know, we have these hour-long meetings. The reality of it is it's about a 45-minute meeting. You got 15 minutes of introductions. You got 7 minutes at the end, and then we all do the awkward goodbyes. But in a remote setting, we don't have to have those hour-long meetings. We can be direct, we can be intentional, and we can be deliberate about this meeting. So be ready. Prepare your tools. I was on a little bit earlier today, and I made sure my mic was working, my camera was set up, my speakers are working, or at least I hope they are. I haven't seen any chats come through that somebody tell me that they're not. So I'm assuming I'm not talking to a wall. But prepare your tools. I wear AirPods often, and I take meetings with AirPods. But as I've learned, they're not always as reliable. They do die. So I've got a cord to make sure that I'm prepared for my meetings. And if possible, get to a virtual meeting earlier. Get there a few minutes earlier. Make sure you're ready, you're prepped, you're ready to go. As I mentioned, you got your tools ready. And then secondly is about meeting etiquette. Know your tools, right? And this one's going to be heavy on one theme here, and it's going to be mute. And knowing your tools is when joining a meeting, go on mute. Find the mute button right away. When you arrive, avoid the not going on mute and avoid distractions for other. We don't go into physical meetings just talking and jabbering and with the lights on and talking and being loud. We go directly in there with a purpose of having a meeting. We should be doing that remotely as well. If you're on the phone, mute the computer. If you're on a computer, mute the phone. We have all heard this. That horrible echo sound is just distracting, and it's just annoying, and there's no reason for it. You join on the computer, mute your phone. If you're on the phone, mute your computer. We don't get that echo. As I mentioned, we've all done this. We all learned from this. This is something that now as soon as I get on, I know what device I'm on. I know what I'm listening to for my speaker and my mic. The other one goes on mute. Sometimes I turn my computer off if I'm on a phone call just because I don't want any background noise. And when you're not talking, as I mentioned again, it's a good practice to go on mute. It's a really good practice to go on mute. Get in the habit of it. Learn the shortcuts. I know like in Zoom, the shortcut is Alt-A to go on mute or unmute. In Microsoft Teams, it's Alt-M to go on mute and unmute. So know your tools. And then inside the meeting, stay focused. Use video when you can. Provide visual cues for the speakers, for the audience, for the attendees. Make sure that we're engaging, but don't let your eyes wander. In meetings, our physical behavior and our behavioral traits kind of give it away once we start to wander. We shrug our shoulders, we kind of let down, we're looking off, looking to the right, we're on our phones, we're thinking about what we're eating for dinner, we're not focused. And as I mentioned, be ready and go into that meeting with an agenda. Concentrate on the speaker and the content shared. It's very, very important that you focus on what it is there in the meeting. These are common things that we talk about inside of a physical meeting, but when you're virtual, it's even more important. Use your time wisely. You know, one of the first things you heard me talk about is have an agenda for a meeting, spend that 45 minutes of a meeting, and don't spend an hour. I would challenge everybody here, the next time you have an hour-long meeting, ask yourself, ask the meeting organizer, ask the attendees, do we really need an hour, or can we solve this in 45 minutes if we're all ready and we all know what we're doing and we're focused? So take advantage of the meeting and be present. Second area that we talked about that we're going to talk about today is communication. And communication works for those who work at it, right? John Powell said, communication works for those who work at it. So what does that mean? First off, be intentional. Helping others is known as a mood booster. Reach out to friends, communicate with your teammates, reach out to colleagues. Even if you've not interacted with these people in a couple months, interact with them. It's good. It's an intentional communication, and it's a good thing. It makes everybody feel like they're part of an organization and they're not stuck on an island. We want to capitalize on that when we work virtually, when we work remotely. We need to capitalize on keeping everybody as a team and feeling like they're part of something. We don't want anybody to go rogue and feel like they're left out and kind of go into a depression. But be considerate of others' time. This is something that for me, I've learned over the years is don't say hello. And it sounds odd, right? Don't say hello. Well, when we're working in a chat, there's no reason for me to put, hey, how are you? Hello. The reality of it is there's a reason you're chatting. And if it's because you want to help them out, maybe it's, hey, I just wanted to connect with you and see how you're doing. But be intentional about it and be considerate of others' time. Get to the point, be ready to address what it is, and be ready to be focused on what you're talking about. And again, I kind of mentioned this when possible, avoid the small talk. Um, make sure everybody's got clear direction on where they're going, the clear expectation, because it's different now. When you're in a physical spot, I could come out of a meeting with my manager and my leaders, and the leader says, Trey, I'm directing you to go do something. And if we have water cooler talk, or if I'm passing that person in the hallway, it's easy to say, hey, how's that project going? When we're working remotely, if nobody reaches out, we need to interact and make sure that we're engaging to make sure we're on the right expectation and we've got the right direction. It's very easy to get drift off here without being intentional and without being ready. So engaging and communication, and make it a point to engage. Make it a point to interact with people that you would not normally do in an office. Make it a point to engage. Use multiple channels. There's many tools out there that are approved tools by your organization, and they fit the compliance, and they're there for you to use. Use the multiple channels, whether it's Teams, Microsoft Teams, whether it's Slack, whether it's Zoom, whether it's could potentially be like a FaceTime, or if you're using Workspace by Facebook. There's multiple channels to communicate. But the biggest thing that if you get anything out of this outside of eating the frog every morning is to find your team's golden hour. It is extremely difficult to manage calendars and invites, but reach out and engage and say, hey, hey, Megan, could you possibly move a meeting so that all of us fit in a 30-minute time zone and that we can work together? And especially working remote, I've worked remote in just about every time zone. I've worked remote and overseas. I've worked remote with really across the globe, and it's extremely difficult to find time for a golden hour. But we've got to find the golden hour. Everybody's engaged and actively working together. Another item engaging is, for especially in leadership and team-based and function-based organization, is to plan those regular scheduled face-to-face meetings, whether it's daily, whether it's weekly, maybe it's monthly, but keep it brief. Stand-ups are a good example of this, and technology, we practice stand-ups. And most of you are like, yeah, we practice stand-ups too. Well, where stand-ups kind of come from is the idea that as a team, we get together, talk about what we did yesterday, talk about what we're doing today, and then talk about what things we need help on. But we need to keep it brief. Everybody gets 2 to 3 minutes to talk about it, and we move on. If it's more engaging than that, then we have a separate meeting. We talk about it as we, as in the call, we reach out and we're intentional about what we need help with. Most importantly, let's be genuine. Um, be genuine and let your personality that you have in your office be reflected in your working remotely. And when you're at home or when you're at a coffee shop, still bring the humor, still bring the wit. Sarcasm's a bit different. That's hard, but still be genuine about it. Um, don't turn an on and off switch just because you're working remote versus when you're working in the office. Having that genuine sense of personality and as a person goes a long way. But part of being genuine, we also need to be kind and can be compassionate and understand everyone communicates differently. We also got to think about it in the quarantine time that everybody has something going on. So we need to be compassionate. When Hunter stepped in and Rebecca kind of laughed and said, hey, give me a minute. We weren't all on the phone rolling our eyes thinking what's she doing. We knew that under these circumstances this is the new normal, and it's going to be the new normal until we can go back to childcare, till we are able to leave. But we still got to think about it once we move to remote working. And I firmly believe a lot of organizations are going to move that route. Once we move that route, we still need to be compassionate and understand everyone communicates differently. Another area there to talk about is when you communicate differently is also how it's interpreted. If you interpret something wrong, or you interpret something that, hey, I don't really think that she's trying to be mean about this, maybe I'm misunderstanding her, pick up voice chat, pick up a Zoom call, give it a 5-minute call. Hey, can you help me talk through this? Or can you help me give some clarification and make sure I understand correctly? That's okay to do. I normally will start a message with somebody on my team, and then I realize, should I just write them a novel, or can I just pick them up and call them for a 5-minute call? And I've learned that picking it up is a lot easier, and we can engage better. Over communicating while working remote, we need to over communicate. And as I mentioned, with setting clear expectations and engaging, we need to over communicate. Reach out. I make it a point to reach out to my team at least every day. Sometimes it's just through a phone call. Sometimes it's just I send a GIF and just says hello, but I don't say hello in the text. It's just a GIF that says hello. But we need to over communicate, and there's many mediums to do that. The third area that we've talked about is evolving habits. Evolving habits are something that, as we learn through remote working, that we need to evolve, and we need to see these come to fruition, and our habits really come to us. But let's forget inspiration. Habit is more dependable. Habit will sustain you whether you're inspired or not. And this quote kind of hit me was, no matter what, some days I want to stay in bed because my bed's cozy and I know I can just stumble to my office, get ready to work. But the reality of it is, the habit that I practice and the habit that I've seen work best is get up, get dressed, to carry on a routine that you normally would do even if you're working at the office, but be deliberate about it. And then that habit's going to form over time. And you'll start to see kind of the power of habit really take over. And there's a fascinating book called The Power of Habit that talks about this, goes more in depth in the psychology of how we form habits. Commute to work. How about this one? How in the world are we going to commute to work when we're working remotely? This is pretty straightforward. Get up, get dressed, take a walk around the block, take a walk down the street, walk into maybe a coffee shop, go to the bookstore for a few minutes and take a peek at a book. But get out, take a walk, and try to replicate your at work routines. So maybe at work, you are, you on your way to work, you stop at Heine Brothers and grab a coffee. Maybe that's what you do every morning. Is you get up, walk around the block, you go into your kitchen, throw a Keurig in, throw a K-cup in, make your own cold press, whatever it may be. Find that routine. Another area of commuting to work, and I think we all do this. This is our time to jam sometimes. I know that I have friends that love commuting to work, and they love going home from work because that's the time they can just let go, listen to a guilty pleasure, and they have that sense of freedom and liberty. But podcasts are also another good one, or just quiet time. Give yourself a chance to hit the ground running. We all need something differently. We all practice differently. We all form our own habits differently. But it's a chance for you to get out and quote unquote commute to work. So are we tired of this one yet, right? And continuing to evolve our daily habits is, it all starts in the morning. It all starts with a routine. It all starts as being part of and making up your work structure so that you can hit the ground running every morning. Or you know what? Maybe you've got so much work that, hey, I'm going to start the work week at 11 o'clock because my company's flexible and they trust me to get my work done. So maybe my routine's a bit different. I go work out in the morning, I run some groceries, run some errands, and then I sit down and work for the rest of the day. Decrease email. Man, I love this one. I could go on and on about decreasing email. I've learned over time that email is a burden. Email is a burden, especially when you're working remote. And it's only, I just need a couple questions. I don't need anything else other than, hey, how are you? I don't need that. Just let's get to the point of what we're doing. Don't send me a long email. Let's go to chat. Let's go to Zoom. Let's go to Slack. But use the tools that you have access to and don't go rogue. If your IT and your organization says no Facebook Messenger, that's not an approved method of communication, don't use it. But use tools like Microsoft Teams as part of Office 365. Use Slack or use Zoom or use another tool like Facebook Workplace that helps you decrease email. If it's quick, conversational, use the tools. And again, don't say hello. Let's get to the point. Just, if we're reaching out to somebody to be deliberate and, hey, how are you doing? That's one thing. But if I need something, hey, where's that TPS report? Can you give me the TPS report? I don't need to say, hello, how are you, John? I hope your day's going well. And then shortly following that, they don't even respond. And we say, where's the TPS report? It makes more sense to just get to the point, save time, and respect the volume of information that we all receive. Decreasing email is so nice that, moving from 300 to 400 emails a day, half of it's junk, half of it's just clutter, and getting down to the real information. Now, if you're working with outside partners and vendors, obviously email is the de facto here. But internally and with an organization and change, let's start to look to decrease email. And then plan. Um, Set do not disturb hours. I learned this. I learned this the hard way. I'm a person who will take on too many things. I'm a person who wants to please, and I'm a person that wants to get something done. I wouldn't call myself a perfectionist, but I am somebody who loves to work. I enjoy the gratification of getting stuff done. But the more that comes in, the more people seek out to talk to you, the more meetings you have, the more chats you have going, the more emails you have to read. So start setting do not disturb hours and create a process and stick to it. Have a deliberate plan. Keep up with this plan and start building a habit around this plan. Creating a to-do list. I think we all know this, right? Hopefully we all do, but if we don't, it's okay. Look at bullet journaling or journaling and get all together. It's a good habit. And if it's a habit that you already have, how could you improve that habit? How can we add a small tweak to it to make it better? So it's a good habit to start planning and to start taking a to-do list. Another area that I've started doing is creating a to-don't list. Let's not spend, especially during this COVID-19 time period, let's not spend time watching the news all day. Let's not spend time on social media all day, but let's create to-do lists and things we need to do. I've started to put meal times on my to-do list. I've started to put times when I need to step away, and I'm beginning to stick to that. And I've noticed that my productivity is better. I've noticed that I can walk into meetings prepared and kind of clear-headed. I'm not worried about the last thing I did. And then there's also a sense of gratification. We love, as humans, gratification. So creating a to-do list, and it's so nice marking all of those off. I heard my wife the other day when she she kind of finished the work for the day, and she said, "This was the most productive day." And I said, "Why?" "Well, I crossed everything off my to-do list." I'm like, I don't know if that constitutes as productive. But then again, how much gratifying was that, and how much stuff did you get done? So I guess it is productive. Um, she creates a to-do list and lives by it. And I've found that to be an awesome perk to evolving our habits and an awesome idea to make it better. Work in sprints. Some of you have probably heard of this term, or there's different methodologies to this, but practice working in a 15-minute time period, then take a few minutes off. So maybe we work in a quick sprint, or maybe the sprint's 30 minutes. We got 30 minutes of grabbing reports, building reports, putting together expense reports or plans, building strategic roadmaps, business continuity, whatever it may be. But sprint it out. It's a sprint. Get through a piece of work, take a few minutes off. Another area I've learned, similar to do not disturb, is start setting office hours. Hey, I'm going to make it an effort to have, open communication, no do not disturb, no scheduled meetings. I just have office hours from maybe 8 to 9 every morning. And maybe those office hours are just a chance to come in and rant. Maybe it's a chance to just come in and talk about the day. Maybe it's just a chance to talk about yesterday. But let's make it a practice to still working in sprints and setting office hours. Evolving habits, as I mentioned, it's extremely powerful. It has kept me from going crazy working remotely. It's kept me from even this quarantine time to change some of my habits. Now today, my wife and I get up in the morning and we wake up usually to the sound of a baby, and we've got to go in, change her diaper. We've got to get her ready. We were doing that before, but now what we're doing is, grabbing her and saying, hey, let's go get breakfast. Now we're making breakfast even more. Now we're not rushing out the door to get to the sitter's house and try to get to work on time. We're able to have a nice sit down breakfast, enjoy our family, and then go right to work after that if that is our routine. We also take a routine around lunchtime. We take about a mile walk. My wife and I and Cora, my daughter, we've never been able to do that. But it's a habit that we've started to evolve through this quarantine, and it's not a bad thing. The last item is mental health. And mental health to me means a lot. Um, it's something that got me through quite a bit of things, and it's something that I've learned from mentors and leaderships at my organization is taking care of yourself is one of the best things you can do. And our doctors tell us that you need to get out and exercise. You need to make sure that you're reading and stimulating your mind, and you're practicing good mental health, and you're organized and all these other things. And as we know, sometimes that's difficult. But your present circumstances don't determine where you can go. They merely determine where you start. And I found this to be very kind of right on target with where we're at today. Your present circumstances do not determine where you can go. They merely determine where you start. And the reason why I like this one, because I'm hopeful that many organizations are going to come out of this trusting their employees and allowing for more remote work. Remote work is a great thing. It's not an 8 to 5 job anymore. It becomes a better career. So mental health, look, we're talking about routines again. I've probably said it 15 times today. And for your mental health, it's super important. I know what I'm doing. I get up, I get ready, I get my shoes on, and I take a walk, or I pick up the news maybe in the mornings. I read a newspaper, I go through my calendar, maybe I play a game. Whatever it may be, stick to the routine and evolve your routine. It's okay to evolve your routine if it's not working. Change it and find something that does work. Now, I've noticed I had to do this for a couple years when I was traveling. I would travel and stay in a hotel for a couple nights, and having a routine at a hotel versus having a routine at home is much different. But I started practicing routines when I was at home and when I was on the road. And then, as I mentioned before, mark items off your to-do list. It is awesome. It is a great feeling. My wife feels productive every day when she marks items off her to-do list. I do too. But it's great for my health. It's something that those endorphin rush that, hey, we just got a lot of stuff done today. And as I mentioned before, a little cheat code here is add meal times to your to-do list. So hopefully you're going to get at least 2 or 3 checkpoints that day, and you can mark it off your to-do list. Plan, plan, and plan. So we're back to planning again. But like everything else, planning is key to mental health. We need to be organized. We should be ahead of the game in planning. Take breaks, set time aside, plan to set time aside. Get outside, take some time off, and work through it. But again, plan for your mental health. And then here's one that really got me when I was in younger part of my career. I hated being interrupted, but I've started to plan to be interrupted. I've started to work in sprints. I've started to expect somebody to ask something in a chat. Luckily, it's not an email, and I don't have to worry about opening this, Outlook and go and find that email and all of that. It's through a chat-based system, and I can plan to be interrupted now and take it in stride. It doesn't affect me anymore, and it's helped me improve my mental health. It's been such a relief knowing that I'm not fighting. Well, why are you interrupting me? I never can get work done. How am I supposed to do anything? And it's not always easy, but set clear expectations. We talked about this early on uh, in this session, and we talked about setting expectations and making sure we've got the right direction. That's fabulous for mental health. Hey, um, so and so, can you make sure that I'm all clear so I can build my to-do list, so that I know when I finish my to-do list that I will be able to clear that off and provide value and add value back to you in the business. But I can do that with the right expectations. And the last item in mental health is find time, and that's not an accidental copy and paste. That is, find alone time, find time to exercise, find time to journal, maybe change the scenery, find time to read a book, find time to make and give back to yourself, find time to help yourself through the journey of working remote. And as I mentioned again, quarantine life and quarantine remote working versus remote working in general is different. But we've got to still find time to do these things. I've thought about it over the past 6 weeks, and working remote and quarantine and handling kid, and having to do really everything versus having an office and going to an office and truly working remote. I could go to a coffee shop, put my headphones in, and just rock out in a coffee shop and get work done. Um, I find it pleasing to find time to go, pleasing to find time to go to the library and work, or just go outside and work. In fact, during this today, I knew I couldn't sit in my office to do this. It's a little bit of a rainy day, but I'm sitting out on the porch taking this. I enjoy changing the scenery when I'm working, and I enjoy finding time to do other things. So with that being said, I've kind of finished a little bit early. I wanted to open the floor to questions. And Charles, I believe, kind of moderating here for us. What kind of questions do we have?
Yeah, so you get me again, Lord help us, with us here. Charles is actually helping me kind of guide through these questions. So I think you're right on target. I clearly get it. The key, for us has been flexibility. I have a 12-month-old and a high chair next to me and a 4-year-old on the other side. Because early on I tried to keep them away from where my work was, and then you have mom guilt and you're not successful because you're running back and forth to check on them. But I think you're hitting the nail right on the head there. Everybody just has to kind of take it in stride. But we do have some questions for you. So I think the first one we got was, do you predict that a lot of firms might permanently shift to remote work as a result of experimenting with it during this crisis?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what I've seen over the past couple of years even is we're starting to see this shift. More organizations are trusting employees. We have better tools than we've ever had. And I start thinking through this, experiment through this very rough time, that hopefully at the end of this, we'll see more remote working. But let's not forget, some organizations just aren't equipped. They don't have the right equipment. They don't have laptops for everybody. Everything's desktop, especially from an information worker's perspective and an office worker. So I do think we'll see a surge in remote work. I hope we do, at least.
Some days I do, some days I don't.
I know, sometimes it's a nice escape, right?
Yeah. Used to be, yes. So it would be interesting to know if you have any thoughts on workplaces that have some workers in the office and some remote, and will they continue to do that? Is that a good fit that you've seen historically, or what are your thoughts on that?
I think it depends. So I like the idea of having the ability and the flexibility to work remotely or work in the office. As you kind of just said, Rebecca, sometimes I want to go to the office. Sometimes I miss my morning commute. Sometimes I miss, that part of my life. Um, but I think it depends answer. It's a matter of flexibility. Now, is it fair to say you can work remote because I trust you, but I don't trust this new person, so I'm not going to let them work remote? No, I disagree with that mentality, especially in business. I don't think that's fair. And I think if you hire someone, you're hiring them because you trust them. You're hiring them to add value to your organization, and you're hiring them to succeed in the same mission. So I think that there's some truth to that, and I also think that it's a difficult decision to be in.
No, you're right on target there. Every time I have hired somebody for my team, I find myself saying, I don't care where you're at as long as you're getting the work done. I hired you for a reason. And if I didn't
Right.
think you'd do it and didn't trust you, I wouldn't have hired you. So
Right. And everybody has their own life, right? We've got
yeah,
doctor's appointments. We may have to take care of an elder. We may have to take care of family members. And that shouldn't, be a burden on the work that we finish day to day.
you are right there. A question from the chat. What are the top 3 tech platforms that you would recommend for working remotely?
All right, a little biased here, but the first one, I think it's a fabulous platform from a compliance perspective, an auditing perspective, and an enterprise-wide perspective. And that's Microsoft Teams and Microsoft SharePoint. Teams has kind of really brought tools that we've never had before. But let's not forget about Slack. Now, Slack and Teams and some of the chat-based engine can be a little noisy, but knowing the tools, you can help control your notification and control how noisy it is. So I think Microsoft Teams and Slack. And then the third one, it's kind of a toss-up between Facebook Workplace and Google. I think Google Enterprise, that is, and Facebook Workplace, which is the enterprise social network for businesses. It's a paid, no ads, no selling data. It's built by Facebook. It's very similar to the Facebook interface. But I think those tools are great. It breaks down silos. It opens up the organization to more communication. And we still get to see the personalities of folks, right? We get to engage. We get to see the funny side sometimes. We get to get to see video chats, and you get to see my daughter sometimes or my dog. So I think that there's fabulous tools out there. And then second part of that question, I think, is using tools that are approved by your organization. You're going to hear me talk about that, over and over again, but it's imperative that there's some legal issues, to be said. Is what if something happened off the record and insider trading happens accidentally, or what if there's an intent to malicious act? We should be using approved organizational tools.
That's great. So obviously I could use this, but somebody else also asked it. So tips on staying focused and avoiding distractions.
Yeah. Put the kids in their own playroom. No, I'm kidding.
I tried it. They get out.
Yeah, yeah. You need to shut the door first. But no, in all seriousness, what I learned is working in sprints. Even when we plan for working in sprints and setting do not disturb. At first, I felt like just a mean person when I was setting do not disturb and telling folks, hey, just don't bother me. And then the more I thought about it, is like, what's the difference in that? And when I'm in my physical office, if I shut the door, if I have that ability, or if I just block out, put headphones on, and I know you're not going to interrupt me. Doing do not disturb in a remote force is great. That's one area to help you kind of stay focused, stay work on task. Creating to-do lists, as I mentioned before, and building a routine. I think those are some of the biggest areas, is, building that routine that I know I'm going to work on a certain aspect. I'm going to work on reporting in the morning. The second half of the day, I may have all my meetings. I've started doing that. Instead of having meetings scattered throughout the day, I have all my meetings at a certain time period. And it's usually in the afternoon, so I don't have to put the kid down for sleep. No, I'm joking about that. We split that responsibility, but it is something that I believe in, is kind of providing a to-do list, sticking to that routine, and working sprints.
So on that note, do you have any advice or recommendations on how someone might kind of reach that agreement with their supervisor, like between the supervisor and team relationship about, I'm going to do this and then I'm going to take breaks and I'm going to step away, kind of to help set that expectation with your immediate boss or your supervisor?
Yeah, I think that's key, right? Transparency is key. And I think we all work differently. We all form habits differently. We're all different people. If we get the work done and we prove that we can get the work done and we have a team and a leader that trusts me because they hired me, then I think it's a conversation that may be difficult at first. But the reality it is that leader, that supervisor is likely thinking the same thing, especially now that we've gone through this time period and it's shown that we can work remote. We've done a fabulous job, and kudos to everybody here. It's incredible what we've seen through this quarantine time. So I think it's a difficult decision. I think it's a difficult conversation, but I think it's a conversation worth having. The downside of that, if they were to say no and get back to your office and you need to work 8 to 5 and I'm going to micromanage you, my response would be maybe it's time to find another job. Maybe it's time to find another company to work for. That's a great question, by the way.
It definitely has to work with your life,
Right.
or you're going to be miserable all day long. So I get that.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for home office setups and things that you have seen work better than others?
Um, so I follow a group of remote workers on Twitter. Most of them technologists. There's some incredible setups. Too many monitors in a room, just so much tech stuff, so many Legos, so many toys, and they've built their own little palace. If that works for you, that's great. What I find to be better is clean, very similar to my office space. If I have a physical space, maybe some inspirational posters, some music playing in the background. Uh, Color of walls make a big difference. Paint your walls, give it an accent color. Hang up photos that want you to drive and that that are sentimental to you. But I think a clean space is best. Now, for me, a couple years in a row, I worked on my laptop only, and that was tough. And going back to my office and having multiple monitors, having a keyboard, having a mouse, um, I had a much more respect for users that are traveling nonstop and are on the road. You think about seeing business women and businessmen when you travel, that's tough. And some of you have done it as well, but it's difficult. And I think from an office setup, use your own flair and your own personality, and make it like you want. You're going to spend the time there, so use your that's I think that's your call. I think it's a personality thing, but overall, I think you should keep it clean.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense. I find myself working, we have an office, but I'm in my kitchen most days. I'm in my kitchen right now because it's easier to
Right.
get a high chair and I can set the kids up and it's easy to grab snacks. And so I think you just have to work what functions best for you, especially in a time like this. Um, so switching gears a little bit, would you have any advice for workers that are seeking career growth or advancement opportunities in a time like this when they're in a remote work environment?
Yeah, I think it's even better. I'm a podcast listener, so I listen to podcasts to build my skills, and I listen to those as kind of sometimes in the background. Sometimes I'm focused. I'll set 30 minutes aside and go listen to a podcast from Harvard about bottlenecking and about business bottlenecks or inefficiencies, and that helps me grow. But during this time period, I know it's difficult. There are tools like LinkedIn has some learning tools. There are Pluralsight has some learning tools. There are fabulous platforms out there that have learning tools. So I think that going out, maybe investing a little bit in yourself is kind of a great idea in terms of finding the right tools that you can learn from. The other side of that too is try out all the different tools. You may not learn one certain way, and you may need, and this is a good time to do it, but find out which way you like to learn through those tools.
Great. Yeah. And I think as I look at opportunities, because I have employees that are on very certain advancement trajectories. And I think this is a big opportunity to step
Yeah.
outside the box, take on new things
Yep.
that you normally do, and really just kill some projects and
Right.
show some different value than you probably would when you were in the office. So I look at this as a big opportunity instead of a total obstacle to that. But that's just me personally.
Yeah,
Um,
very well put. Yeah.
One question we have is burnout and unplugging can be major issues for remote work. So strategies for handling these. I know you've talked about kind of the sprints, but when it gets to be dinner time, how do you turn it off? Because you're never leaving your house now, or how do you turn it off on the weekend? So what are your tips or suggestions for that?
Yeah, so the first one that I learned, and I learned this about 7, 8 years ago, I get dressed in the morning like I'm going to the office, kind of where I still stay a little more casual than I would. But at the end of my workday, whether it's 4:30, whether it's 5:36, whatever time I finish or feel like I'm accomplished for the day, I go change my clothes. I change them right there. And, it's like, well, why would I put other clothes on? Because that's a mental flip for me. That tells me and myself that work's over. I've started to unplug more and turn notifications off. This was extremely hard for me to do. But now at the end of the day, I spend a couple minutes going to my phone, going to turn Outlook messages off, going to turn Teams messages off, and really setting a do not disturb so I can spend more time with my family. Um, Getting up early actually helps shutting down at the end of the day. Get up, follow a routine, get some exercise, get some work done early in the morning. That way, when you're tired and you're exhausted, then it's time to start, fulfilling with your family and having dinner, catching up on shows and so forth. That's a great question, and it's something that I don't do very well. I I talk about it and I practice it as much as I can. I'll shut down, and then it's 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. My daughter's been in bed for a couple hours and I'm back to working. And I've burnt myself out before. I've had to reach out to mentors and say, how in the world are you doing this? How are you surviving burnout? Now, I think with the quarantine time, we're kind of seeing a honeymoon stage, right? We've got folks this is the first time they've ever been able to work remote, and they work remote and they're like, man, I got to prove myself. I've got to keep working. I need to work more visibly so that my supervisor or manager sees it. I need to be more engaged, and I need to just really do a lot so that they know I'm not just sitting here, watching TV. That's going to cause burnout. Again, work on getting your jobs done, create a to-do list, and at the end of the day, take something, whatever it may be, changing the clothes, going on a walk, preheating for dinner, getting stuff ready and cooking and prepping, whatever it may be. I think that's a time where your body and your mind should shift.
I think that's great advice. I do the same thing. So after I get the kids to bed, I generally go back and answer emails at night. But to combat that, I have found myself taking, 30 minutes, 45 minutes or whatever it is during the day to just sit down and play with them or disconnect from
Right.
it. I think
Right.
it's a balance. And it's hard to do that. But I also realize, and I think most people don't give themselves enough credit, you're probably way more productive at home than you were in the office because people
Right.
in to say hi. That's not happening now.
Right.
So you're
Right.
probably
Water
putting
cooler
out way
talk does
more
not
work.
exist.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. You're
absolutely.
doing way
Yep.
more. So it's I think people worry, and it is the perception. You want people to think you're producing as much as you would in the office, but I think people would surprise themselves at what people's perceptions are about what they're accomplishing.
Right. Right.
I do have a question for you to talk a little bit more about strategies or suggestions to reduce the email across teams and companies that you talk about.
Yeah. I could go on with this forever. So I'll try to keep it brief and direct. But I think strategies, we've seen some strategies that we've watched, kind of very bold strategies. I had an organization about 5 years ago turn off email attachments. If you think about that, why in the world would they turn off email attachments in Outlook? So in Outlook, you can't attach an email. If this is internal, you're sending this to a supervisor or to a team member, and you normally put, can you please review this, attach the document. Well, what we're seeing now is when that happened, it automatically forced users to move to collaboration platforms, and it moved them over to the chat-based engine, and it moved them over to using the review features in Word or PowerPoint. So that was one. That was bold. I love that idea. Another one is taking time to invest in change management. Organization change management is a key pillar to success. And what we see is organizations don't treat it as seriously as they should. And change management and adoption and adopting to the tools is a fabulous way to start getting out of the email habit. we're not relying on Outlook anymore. Now we're relying on Microsoft Teams or Slack or another chat-based system. Now, the legal side and the compliance side, and people are thinking, well, I can't do that. My Outlook's my system of record. That's not necessarily technically true. Chat and those engines are just as in compliant and a legal record than anything else. So I think that's a great question, and it's an area for me. I push productivity and collaboration. I believe we should be working differently than what we do now, and I think it's going to see a generation change and the workforce change, where it's like the dial-up phones, or it's like a rotary phone. That it's, what in the world is that today? I think we'll think about that, and in years down the road, is what in the world's email, or why are you still using email?
I think that makes a ton of sense. So a totally different question, and I wanted to share it because I hadn't even really thought about it. So how you would recommend a company to bring a new employee in during a remote work environment, and how to have them integrate with the team?
Yeah, that's a great question. So at H&B, we had this happen on day one of the quarantine. Now, everything was set up, but the employee's first day on the job was the first day that it was mandated to work from home. And I thought about that when it happened, and I thought, oh my, that's unfortunate for her. That's unfortunate for HR. That's unfortunate for benefit team and the recruiting team and the employee engagement team. And then I start to think about it. Why? It's not, that's the way we're going to be working. And if that's the way we're going to be doing things, and then if this is the new normal, why is it that big of a deal? So I think using tools, and I think having a program, that's key, is having a program that, you set up a Zoom call and you set it up with the team, or the first day of employee orientation, maybe that team member, they all have a virtual happy hour or virtual lunch together. Sit down and grab your food and sit really on the computer and eat and talk about, what was going on the day before for you, or what you had problems with. So I think building a program and a policy to stick to it is one good way to engage with employee onboarding and orientation. Tools are another big part of that. You'll hear me talk about tools, and you've heard me talk about tools, but the tools are what facilitate, and through that medium is the way to onboard employees. Another thing that we see is having employees fill out their profile, their technical profiles. So you log into Outlook, and I get to see a picture of Rebecca. I get to see what Rebecca does. I get to see her skills. I get to see where I can reach her. So I think those are important, because then we can put a face to a name, we can put a face to a conversation, and we can put a face to the people we work with.
I think that's great. We're having a meltdown over here. You don't have that, Giz, right? Cora's not that much older than Macy. So.
No. Yeah. Cora's napping right now, so this worked out a good time for us.
Well, mine should be, and that did not happen. So we are muscling through this. Yes. So people find themselves with lots of time to read these days. Not me, clearly, but some people. Recommended books or blogs that you would suggest for folks in the remote work world?
Yeah, the very first one I'm going to recommend is Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. Duhigg, I think is how you pronounce his last name. The book is fabulous in talking about habit change, and it goes into some details about how habits help sell products, how habits start helping drive innovation. And if you've ever heard of the purple cow, that was a habit change. Or if you've heard about how the Lysol story happened, that was a habit change in their marketing. I found that to be fascinating, because I could relate that back to myself, to start thinking about the habits that I have. And I'm still getting the same thing done. Lysol's still selling products, but they changed the behavior of the consumer's habit. And for me, why can't I do that if it makes it more efficient? So I found that book to be very powerful. Harvard Business Review, and I found a couple on there about leadership. I love the Harvard Business Review. Every day they have good content. Every day, that's a great one I follow. Another one I follow is Microsoft's Remote Worker. They have a LinkedIn group, and they have COVID resources today. Those were fascinating for me, because I'd like, Microsoft, why would they have stuff on soft skills and stuff working remote? And then I realized they've got a bunch of smart people. They've got 30,000 employees, and they work remote. Microsoft is known for working remote, as is Google, as is Facebook. They've produced some good quality content. Blog-wise, unfortunately for me, my blogs I'm reading are from technical folks, tech community, but there's a guy by the name of Shane Hanselman. Shane is just an incredible speaker, incredible, and articulates very well. He's a great writer. Shane talks about working in this quarantine time and working remote. He's been remote for 13 years, and we've exchanged, kind of communication about, what it's like to work remote and what it's like not to get burnt out and knowing when to do that. So I think that from those two are where I would say, and the third one is the Harvard Business Review. I kind of rely on those more than anything.
That's great. Only a couple more questions here, and then we're
Okay.
going to let you go because I know I'm picking your brain. How often should team meetings or full staff meetings happen in remote work environments? What would you suggest?
So I think it depends on the size of a company. I believe in town halls more than all company. I know it's kind of similar, but I believe in town halls and videos instead of all company meetings. I think you still produce the same content, but provide live videos or videos on demand that the team can look at in their spare time. Especially if we trust the employees and the employee wants to be aware of what's going on, they're going to have that. Or having a town hall with a Q&A. But I still think those last, anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. Team meetings, I fundamentally believe, should be under 30 minutes. A small team of 4 or 5, get in, get out. You work with each other anyway. You're chatting anyway. And then ask yourself, do we really need a meeting for this? And then getting in, getting out. So I think under 30 is a great idea for teams. And if you can't do it under 30, break it up into smaller sections. And that's where the sprint mentality comes from, is sprint through a meeting, spend some time doing something else, sprint through another meeting. Let's not have a 2-hour-long meeting. And what happens, we lose focus. We naturally lose focus in those hour and a half, 2-hour meetings. But that's a good question. And I think that working remote now, it's even more imperative for leaders to start looking at the time constraints that we put on employees, because we do have hunters and we do have Quoras, and we do need to engage, in our personal life. And to sit through a 2-hour meeting, it's brutal. And personally, I don't think it's fair.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. I find myself challenged with it when we have, and sometimes I ask myself, did we need a meeting for this? And that's probably my fault for never asking that question, but my boss is not working from home. He is an essential business. So I am home with my kids all day long by myself. And when I get to the end of the day and I've had 6 or 7 hours of conference calls, you find yourself saying, man, I wish I could have slimmed that down.
Right.
But I think that's just, it's part of the learning curve.
Yeah, and I hate having a to-do list that's to-do list, take this one meeting, to-do list, take the third meeting, to-do list, take the sixth meeting. And then I walk out the end of the day and I'm going to prep for dinner, and it's like, well, what did I do today? It's like I couldn't get anything done. Right. Now I got to start tomorrow and do it again. And it's, do I really need to be in there? Another tool and tip that I've learned is in Office 365, and I believe the other platforms do this. They have a tool called My Analytics. And what it does is it looks at your calendar invites, and it looks at who you spend the most time with and who is in that meeting with you. And it recommends that maybe you shouldn't attend this meeting because your superior or colleagues already attending it. They could take notes for you and bring it back. I thought that was fabulous. When I first saw that, it was kind of like mind blowing. Yeah, and I was like, well, why didn't I think of this? And instead we're wasting time and money and effort by bringing everybody into the room.
All right. Well, being mindful of everybody's time, because we are right about here, I just want to say thank you again to Trey. This has been such good advice, and I think timely advice. So thank you for letting us pick your brain and for giving us all of these tips and tricks.
Absolutely.
Say thanks to everybody for joining us today. As we always say when we're closing out, we are all in this together. As the voice of your business community, GLI continues to support you during this critical time with the latest news and impacts on your business, and we'll continue to provide you resources to help you and your employees get through this. We are working hard to plan for how our community is going to prepare for a time after COVID-19. As a reminder, the discussion was recorded, and we'll be posting that to greaterlouisville.com and social channels to refer back if needed, or if you'd like to share this with some of your teams. We hope this has been valuable information and that you can join us for our next virtual call, which is Tuesday morning from 9:30 to 10:30. We're going to have a very interesting conversation with the Chief Investment Strategist at Baird, Bruce Biddles, to discuss the stock market and the general economic outlook, which I think we have tons of questions about right now. So if you guys have any additional needs or questions, please feel free to use the resources and contact information on our website. And again, please stay safe and well, and everybody have a great day.
Yeah, thank you all, and I appreciate it, Rebecca.
Thanks, Trey.